This is a whistle-stop tour because I have only 3 trend sentiments in the space of time that we have. So hold onto your seat. It's going to be fast and furious. Okay, so here we go with a bit of technology. It's actually working good. So I think one of the main things to say is that, food doesn't exist in a vacuum. So when I look at trends, I look at everything that surrounds us because we are, especially in the UK, one of the most trend aspirational countries in the world, so that we are influenced by change all the time. And we're always looking for the next big thing, the next new thing, the thing to tell our friends that this is the thing that everyone should be eating or doing. So I look at everything from fashion, interiors, buyer behavior, mouthfeel perception, and everything else that is in our environment. So I think really what's really important right now is that we've lived through a time that we've never experienced before. And it's not just, I don't just mean COVID and the lockdown, but in the last few hundred years, we have had a different aspirational idea as being human, which is having. We have wanted to have things. And it's really been our sort of modus operandi as a human being to get an education, get a car, get a bigger car, get married, get a house, get a bigger house. Having stuff and things and achievements has been how we have looked at our social value. And that is changing in 2020, which I talked about something that looked very much like COVID in 2018. And I showed people in hazmat suits and masks and had this conversation with lots of audiences who were probably more interested in what's for lunch. And I said, you're going to get to 2020 and look at your life in 2019 and it's going to be unrecognizable. Because we're in this unprecedented change, this peak in 2020, which was for me predictable, that we're moving into a time of knowing, and it's a very different time for human consciousness and our behavior. So all of this for me underpins what we're going to be eating, and really more importantly, why, because the why for me is key. So we've gone for this phase of normal, this acceleration of if we just keep doing the same old thing and a little bit better, we'll always improve and we'll always make more money or all of that good stuff. And then we hit crisis in 2020. And right now we're in a chaotic phase, which I've predicted will happen until March 2023. So in this chaotic phase, this is the time for the most incredible innovation. People are responding very quickly. It's massively innovative, because people feel destabilized, but they also have new needs, new requirements, things that could be addressed very quickly. And the way in which we will accept things as a consumer has also changed. The way in which we buy, the way in which we have values will change and is changing. So that's a really quick sort of analysis of where we're at. Because right now we're in this period of insecurity. We're desperate for a hug. This image on the right is a hug machine. Just because we're so desperate for one, we can't get one from somebody we know. Maybe we can just get into a little machine and feel that we're being hugged. And I love the image in the middle, which I feel like is indicative of where we're at and where we will be at really for the next sort of 18 months. So I think it's important for people to realize we're never going to go back to normal, because that's an old time, it's an old paradigm. We're moving into a new phase and a new time. And this raki is raki, obviously, it's alcohol. You peel off the fabric label, stick that in the bottle, set fire to that, and it's a whole other kind of cocktail. And I think we're in this explosive time, and we're going to see and experience lots of big cataclysmic events really in the next 18 months. But for me, the big question right now for the next 5 or 6 years that we're all fundamentally asking in some way or another, and brands are addressing in some way or another, is what does it mean to be human? And it's interesting from the speakers before who are all talking about this in different ways, because of course, technology isn't going to go away. It's about us. We are that digital interface. It's been in the past, I feel like it's been separate from us. And now we are the interface. As we start to see it embedded in many more ways, in the skin, in the eye, in the teeth, we'll start to see this. So I think the big question is, what does it mean to be human? And I love this quote, that there will be a time when you believe that everything is finished, and that will be the beginning. And I think that's the sort of phase that we're in. So from that, I'm going to go into the first trend sentiment, which is around now, which is self-sufficiency. I think the key things for this, and the key things underpinning food are things like waste as wealth, air, which I'll go into, water, and the DIY functionality that we're starting to embrace much more, this sort of low tech. So firstly, I'm talking about air. I think one of the things that we've been buying for a long time is air. a lot of air. And we've also been buying the packaging that goes around that air, which has ended up as landfill. So lots of brands are going to get wise to the fact that consumers are no longer buying this. And the thing with air, of course, is that it makes us think we're buying a lot more than we really are. It's a little bit of an illusion. But it's also a phenomenal ingredient of the future. In fact, for me, I think it's the most exciting ingredient of the future. One of the things that 3D printing enables us to do is to put air into things very beautifully. So as commodities prices go up, if we look at something like cacao in the image on the left, you've got a box of chocolates. It's the only ingredient is chocolate and air. But we're all drawn to different textures, and textures are a big event in the future. I think we're starting to see this come to the fore. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. But we are drawn to these different shapes, and what we also realize is we put this cube in our mouth, and as a perception we feel like we're almost getting the same amount of chocolate per bite, but really we're getting, in some cases, a lot more air than we are ordinarily. I mean, I think we think about things like Curly Wurly and Polo who latched onto this, but we can do this in a much cleverer, more beautiful way. But the big thing with air is that it changes the texture of things. So we can pump air into things like avocado, which people might not like because it's slimy. People tend not to like things because of texture rather than taste. So mushrooms, slimy, it's a texture we don't like in the UK. And we can take something like cheese on the left and we can puff that with air and we can have crunchy cheese. Not only does it change the texture, but it also enables us to use a lot less of it. So brands tend to make more money, we eat less calories, and the commodities are less impactful on the environment because we're using less. But really it's the ingredient of the future because it is the first protein that's available to everybody, that cleans the air in its process, that doesn't harm anything by making it. And this is one of the examples. The image in the center is Solein, a brand, but there's so many brands vying for this top spot to really make it an affordable commodity for the masses. And this is where the investment in Silicon Valley is really going, because it can make things that look just like meat, like the image on the right, so that you're starting to see just how we can take a vegan trend, which is not just a fad. You know, we're seeing this plant-based eating becoming so big in the West that it's unstoppable. So that finding solutions that can be put in place that are not going to be really environmentally damaging, like something like soya, or actually harmful, physically harmful as well for us in the long term. So we start to see foods puffed with air, creative ideas around this. You know, you can't get your kids to eat Brussels sprouts, but you could puff them with air. It could be a much more interesting food. The next topic is water, and we're starting to see that we've already seen the rise of water sommeliers, a lot more shelf space for water, but the big question is always around the bottle, because plastic is a real no-no. And the alcohol consumption in this country is definitely on the decline, especially in the under 30s. So water becoming big business, with black water, artichoke water, gold infused waters, designer waters, hoppy, sparkling brewed waters, the first sort of non-alcoholic, but it is a brewed water like a beer, oxygen infused waters, things that are good for the gut and the microbiome that are also waters. Swarovski encrusted bottles, brand extensions like Hello Kitty. I mean, it really goes on and on. But again, the packaging, like I said, is really the focus. So you can have something like the bottle on the left where you bite the top off, you squeeze out the liquid in the middle, and then you can either eat the membrane or it will become not recyclable, because that can take 25 years in landfill, but it can be compostable, so that we can really see how this can benefit in a 360 kind of way. But again, if we put water and air together, we can use less water in our homes without being told what to do, because we hate that. If we make the faucet beautiful and we put air into this water supply from the faucet, we can use 1/3 less water immediately. And as we see shops changing and closing and our high street, the face of our high street really shifting, we expect to see some water depositories opening up so that we can get perfectly pure chloride, pesticide, fluoride-free water that is perfectly pure. So we can expect to see this sort of thing where water becomes big business. This is the idea of self-sufficiency. I don't think it's very good for your teeth, but this is a guy that bit his own chair. So that we're really starting to want to have things that are much more simple, a much more curated life. It's not always about having less, but it's about having better that lasts, so that things become much more simple. I love that he's not used any screws or nails in this, that he's just bitten the whole thing. that we can start to see this playing out in edible packaging, a lot of different sorts of edible packaging, lots of things like, I mean, there's so many examples of where we're seeing second revenue streams for food businesses being used in another commodity. So, for example, coffee grounds in the two examples on the right, where we can make cups, saucers that are dishwasher safe. Even the used cooking oils from fast food restaurants can be used to make beautiful vases and things like that. Even the air pollution can be used now to make an ink, salmon skin as a fabric, even used milk, so that when we start to see all the waste milk in the milk production process being used to make beautiful fabrics for shoes, for clothes. And you probably already, one of the first sort of things that came to market like this was Pinatex, which was the pineapple waste from the pineapple production plants made into beautiful leathers that camper used. Even orange peel being used to make lovely silks from the orange juice making process. The technology now is superb that we can really start to get behind all of these different second revenue streams for food businesses. My favourite example of this going forward is, you know, when we ask what does it mean to be human, we are part of nature, we are part of this equation, and we are already also contributing to landfill because we are buried. So one of the things that I like the idea of is that we can turn our loved ones into a backpack. This is maybe a little extreme, but when we talk about the future, it mostly is. I think people are always shocked about most of the things that we talk about in the future, and then they come to pass and it becomes completely normal. So this is grandma, a picture of grandma on the right. The second trend silo is eco-futurism, and I think, you know, we're all very much more aware, and increasingly so, about what's going on with our world, and that we are no longer human beings and the world. We are part of that equation. And so that we can't go back. It's not just about saying, okay, well, now we're just going to go back to how it was in the 1950s. Everyone's got an allotment and we'll grow our own, which is great, and people do that, and that's fantastic. But it has to have a twist, because we're in now. We can't reverse everything. So that we can see things like beautiful building materials, like the image on the right, being built from mushrooms, so that we can create structures from our food, that we can have a future that has a lot of motifs to do with nature, that we can embrace that as we start to see the outside becoming more inside and us wanting to be outside a lot more. We really saw that during lockdown, this real hankering for nature. So all of these motifs come into tableware, they come into the homes where we have twigs for handles, and we have things that are embossed and a lot more real. Again, we've sort of seen that texture come through, because that's nature, it is textured. We've had a very Zoom, like we're having right now, this 3D world has been taken away from us, and we are really in this flat screen world. So bringing texture in, embracing nature, wanting to live amongst nature. Even things like this capsule on the water, you know, trying to find ways in which we can be part of our ecosystem. We'll start to see this playing out. We'll start to see this playing out in cakes, much more earthy, dark, muddy soil, real Earth's core type stuff in these beautiful cakes that look like geodes, but of course they are edible. Again, lots and lots of nature motifs. And when we start to see on the catwalk people with dresses that are already growing, and we start to see cakes that look like moss, we know that that stuff's really coming through. Butter-like stones, really beautiful things where we're really starting to revere nature. And 3D printing lends itself brilliantly to reusing scraps, so that we can have a lot of food waste that becomes high-end meals a second time round. Again, this idea of things that are growing, that we're eating, and this inside out, outside in. A big rise in things of the green foods like kale in our desserts and chocolate bars, or seaweed in our popcorn, algae, lichen, seaweed as packaging, beautiful things that we can incorporate that are around, especially in the UK. We have so many different seaweeds because we're a coastal country. So we have a lot of stuff available to us that we haven't really used yet. And even things like tree bark, we're recreating tree bark as fabrics, or this on the right is Bartex made from tree bark, but it's a type of leather. I love this idea at Easter, rather than creating an Easter egg, that a high-end chocolatier made these things that look very much more like earthy roots with chocolate ants and snails all over them, really speaking to who we are right now and how we feel this at the time. And again, this question about being human, burial pods, rather than being buried in a coffin, we're again going back to this. We'll start to see this egg shape as a motif going forward, so that we will want to be buried in these eco pods like the womb, and we will grow into a tree. And even the Beverly Hills Hilton, people don't want to stay in a high-end room anymore. They'd rather pay to glamp on the roof. And this is a real sort of reinforcement of this sense of wanting to be in nature. And the final trend sentiment today is liberate. And I think this is where we're going. We just want to feel, we want some comfort. We want to feel liberated from this last 15 months. And we're really hitting this time of creativity. So we start to see things that are very fluffy and puffy and unctuous and comforting. And of course, we see it across category, always with food. We see it in fashion. Soft, fluffy, puffy textures and foods, things that make us feel like we're comforted, almost like eating a hug, so that we start to want to bite into things. That 3D printing again lends itself beautifully to creating interiors that have this depth, this softness, this feeling of something that's a lot less harsh. We're putting texture into things, textured dineware, textured spoons, soft, fluffy, puffy things like meringue ice creams, or these Japanese cheesecakes, which are really fluffy and squidgy. Japanese pancakes are a perfect example of this, as we'll start to see these coming as a much more of a thing this year and next year. And just fun, playing with our food. We want experience. We want to be able to put two flavors together. We want to be able to cut through things and see a new image. We want the adventure. Even the cake decorating is becoming more 3D. So rather than just icing it, it's almost like it's been painted with a knife. It's much more sculpture. It's much more textural. And that's playing through everything. And of course, again, you know, we've just got much better technology, really clever molds, being able to do things like these centerpieces with chocolate. It's just taking it out of the chocolate box and giving it a new form. Because again, 3D printing is brilliant at this. And although it looks like some Lego on the left, it is actually sushi that's been digitally made using the actual ingredients. Exactly the same on the right, sushi, but much more interesting. And one of the great things about texture is that it takes products that have been a little bit old hat for the new generation, and croissants is a brilliant example of that, where younger people don't really they think it's old people's food. And you make croissants into a cube, and suddenly it's something that they can own. It's a new thing. So brands really look to that for new innovation around old products. And we start to see this texture playing out everywhere, even in interiors where we want to just have much more feeling, much more depth. We change the mold of an ice cream, of a lollipop, and we change the whole eating experience. Every single thing that we can do to make it more fun. We'll see much more texture around this area as well, because this will be the focus in the next year. And of course, it replicates. We always see it across categories. So if you're seeing stuff that you really love in fashion, it's going to come up in food. Again, fun-shaped lollipops, some which are a bit more questionable than others. But I'll leave you with this quote, which is my favorite quote. The charisma of food, its capacity to be everything. It is identity and culture and history. It's science and nature and botany. It is the earth. It's our family, our philosophy, our past. It's the most important matter in our lives. It's more than in its ingredients. It is transcendent. But it's also just dinner. It means nothing. It's serious, and it's not. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, Morgaine. That was phenomenal, and it just makes me want to sort of meet up and go on a journey with you, actually. By the way, Morgaine, if we were going to go in our sort of little time machine off to a corner of the world right now, and you were going to point and go, have a look over here, where on the globe would you take us today?
I would take you to Korea.
South Korea.
Yes, yeah. We might never get out of the north, but yes, we'd go to South Korea, I think.
Oh, well, put it on the list. Bit of soul food, as they say down there. I've got so many questions coming in for you, Morgaine. Here we go. What's the most challenging part of your job?
The technology. Doing this. I love everything I do. I like audiences way better than technology, and I think just because there's so many possibilities of things going wrong, and I hate to have to think about all that stuff. So
well, you've done an amazing job this morning, and thank you for bringing such vivid slides and photos to our audience as well. We got such great reactions as we were watching it. Next question, it's particularly about agriculture. So With underground farming, who knew, now contributing to the food supply chain, what do you see as the next change in agriculture in particular?
Like everything, I mean, yes, there is a lot of, we actually haven't even started to really plumb the depths of the possibilities of that, and there's only so many things that it might be relating to things like growing underground, which is great. Disused tube lines in London being used, lots of underground spaces, or even disused spaces, because we can grow mushrooms, and mushrooms are a great, they can make fabrics, they can make building materials. They're all kinds of medicinal purposes. They're multifunctional. They're really fantastic, and they grow in dark, dank places, of which we have many. So I think it's about using wasteland. I think it's about growing in much smaller areas without having to be industrial. If we all just grew in that little small areas, I think that will be a big breakthrough. I think we're going to start seeing many more growing collectives, so that we are going to directly, for me, the future of the supermarket is very questionable.
Yeah,
as we go further out. And I mean, because today was such a whistle-stop tour and it's kind of fun, but there's a lot more research. And one of the things, the supermarket will perhaps change, and definitely, it will not be the same as it is now in 5 years.
Yeah,
Morgaine,
I think we're going to start to see buying collectives coming in.
Now we've got a question, Roger, go on.
Yeah, Morgaine, can I jump in? And first of all, thank you so much. But picking up on that agricultural theme, obviously a lot of our customers, a lot of people watching will be in the farming industry. Should they be worried, as a livestock farmer or as a dairy farmer, what is their future in 10 years' time?
I think one of the biggest, for me right now, I think if I had that business, I would be looking at really understanding permaculture, really understand. It's a very hard transition because it takes quite a few years to transition, as I understand. But getting involved in the way in which nature behaves, because it's going to underpin, it's going to be the security net, really. And I think in terms of meat, and it's questionable, it's difficult. As we go forward, we will be eating less meat. We are eating less meat already. I think it's 1/5 of girls under 25 are already vegetarian in the whole of Europe, and 1/4 in the UK.
Wow. Interesting. Thank you, Morgaine. We've just got a couple more minutes together. Here's a quick question from a viewer. Do you see a market for insects as food in the West? Some would say it's just not cricket, but what do you say?
They've definitely got the right guy with you. We've been eating insects. I mean, I have a book called Why Not Eat Insects from 1926. And so it's been a big conversation in the West for a long time. Lots of brands are doing that. I remember speaking to Nando's years ago, must be about 10 years ago, saying, they'd be really well placed to do like an insect burger or an insect ball or something. I call them insect bites. I think you should call them insect bites.
Bug bites.
And they thought it was really funny. But now they believe they're doing a little bit of innovation around that. So I think that, it's possible. It's absolutely possible, that we're selling it much more as animal feed. So this actual sale of insects has gone through the roof for animal feed. And I've got some lovely crackers that are, they've just been developed, and they are made from insects.
Goodness me! So you're getting our minds going this morning. So, waiter, there's a fly in my soup. Yes, madam, that's the crouton. I think it's very interesting evolution. Morgaine, could we persuade you just to answer one or two future questions after today's event? We won't take too much of your time, but would you be prepared to do that?
Yes, yeah.
Oh, that would be so amazing, because we've got so many more sort of flooding in from our guests. But for now, I know Roger and I will reflect on this as being an absolute highlight of our event so far. But for now, Dr. Morgaine Gaye, thank you so much. It's lovely to see you, Morgaine.
Thank you so much.